Hey everyone, Max at 343 Labs here. We're a music production school based in New York City, Berlin, and online. And today I'd like to show you a clip by one of our instructors, Justin Beck, where he explains loudness and the difference between perceived volume and actual volume. Now this is of course super important when you're mixing and mastering. This clip is taken from 343 TV, which airs several times per week right here on our YouTube channel. If you like what you see, don't forget to subscribe, and let's get into it.
What is loudness, right? And so the answer is a couple of things. And what we need to really understand first, before we truly dive deep into this, is that there are two types of measurement for volume. So I'm going to drag on this WLM meter from Waves. I'm actually just going to put on the master so I don't have to constantly switch between these tracks. And what this basically does is it's a LUFS meter, right? So it measures what we call loudness units full scale. Now, loudness units full scale are something that's pretty new. It's only really started coming around in the last decade. And the idea behind it is that this is a way to measure what we call true volume or perceived volume, right? And so there's a big difference in the way we measure volume between perceived volume and then actual volume. So what is the difference between perceived loudness and actual loudness? Well, on the most basic level, perceived loudness is the way that the human ear interacts with tonal balance. So, for instance, if I play you two kicks in sequence right after each other, which as we can see are pretty much the same volume, but they're different samples, you're going to notice that the difference in volume, there's going to seem like there's a difference in volume. All right, this is not as good of an example as I was hoping it would be. Let's go here. All right, there we go. Now, if we get in real close with these waves, we can see there is a little bit of a genuine difference in volume. So let's try to make them match as much as possible. That looks like it's probably around the same measured volume. And let's go between this one and this one. So what we can see is right away that the first kick sounds quieter, right? So let's jump real quick into our WLM mastering meter. And all this is going to do is it's going to show us short term what the perceived loudness is. Let's give it a little more time to actually react. Okay. So as you can see, the first kick is measured in perceived loudness as being quieter. Right? The first kick is about 28 and the second kick is about 22. Let's just see that one more time. Right, so 28 LUFS versus 22 LUFS. Okay. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to drag on Spectrum, the analyzer from Ableton. And what we're going to look at is what is the difference in volume in the low frequency information, right? That's all I want to look at. So we're going to look right around here. We're going to try to keep an eye on these levels and see which one's louder. Well, that's interesting. Let's do that again. So this high water mark, we're going to call this, right, is coming from the first kick, which is noticeably louder. So let's just only listen to the first kick again. So this is the tonal profile, the tonal balance profile of the first kick, right? And as we can see at this low frequency of about 53 hertz, right, it is louder. Or it's pretty loud. That's its loudest spot, right? And it gradually decreases in volume. Now, if we look at the next kick, make this as big as possible. All right. what we're going to see is a significantly louder overall volume here in this low frequency area, right? And this is a higher pitched kick, and it has more high frequency detail in it, right? So I want to compare this view right here with the one at the beginning. One more time. So this is the peak of the first one, and this is the peak of the second one. So purely on the level of like subjective analysis, you can see that the first kick is literally louder. It hits the loudest point between these two, right? This is the overall sum of the two signals. And you could say there's a small difference, right? This is negative 21 decibels at its peak, which is the 909 kick, the second one. And this is negative 13 decibels actually at its peak. So that's a pretty big difference. But why then does the first kick sound so much quieter than the second kick? So the reason for this is because actual volume measurement, in terms of the subjective scientific measurement of volume, right, of where a sound is peaking, is very different than the way that our ears actually perceive the level of signal, or as we call it, volume or loudness. So I want you to think about this. Take this in consideration for a second, okay? Over the course of the past 100,000, 200,000 years, maybe even longer, right, the human ear has evolved to have actually a built-in EQ curve. And this EQ curve is called a Fletcher-Munson curve. And essentially what it is it is from 900 hertz to 3,900 hertz. Our ears are more sensitive. The reason for that is because that's where the average range of the human voice falls. So the fundamental frequencies, the primary timbre of what defines the clarity of a human voice, right? And also the intelligibility, right? How can you tell the difference between Sarah and Mary? How can you tell the difference between John and Luke, right? It's their overall harmonic profile of their voice, which the most defining characteristics of that happen between 900 and 3,900, right? 900 and 3,900. So, very first off, right? The thing you have to consider is that what determines loudness is not the measurement of loudness in the DAW on a technical level, right? You drag on a metering plugin for RMS or something, it tells you it's -3, right? But then you play a hi-hat and suddenly it sounds louder or something, right? Which we're about to get into. The real measure of loudness is how loud our ears think it is. So, to the point that I was just making, right, I'm going to now drag on a hi-hat sample. And you'll see where I'm going with this. We're going to start producing in a second. I'm going to teach you how to make your music loud. But I'm just trying to explain something very simple first. Okay. So I'm going to drag this right into the DAW and not adjust the volume at all. And again, we're going to go to our master bus. And we're going to look at the measurement of the loudness. So that's interesting. Let's play this right here. Okay, there we go. So this is negative 31 LUFS. And that is negative 23. But if you play them next to each other in a beat, right? And just a very simple house groove or something. They pretty much sound like they're the same volume. Right? They sound balanced to our ears. So how can it be that the hi-hat, which is so much quieter, seems just as loud as the kick? Well, the answer is really simple. Basically, measured volume and perceived volume are opposites. Let's say that again. Measured volume and perceived volume are opposites. And so here's what I mean by that, okay? Lower frequency sounds create more volume. Now, what I mean by that is they create higher sound pressure level. Like, quite literally, it's just measured as being louder. If there was no human in the room and we just had a meter, right, dictating how loud something gets, the low frequency information is always the loudest part of a mix, always the loudest part of a sound, right? High frequency information, on the other hand, is quieter, right? So it's quietest. So if we look at the spectrum analyzer for this kick drum, so let's open up Spectrum again. Oh, come on, stop it. Right? We can see that there's a significant, huge bump in the low end. Now that makes sense because this sound is really low, right? But now let's look at this kick drum. Reset the frequency spectrum. So this sound clearly sounds like it has more high frequencies in it than this one. But as you can see, there's not that big of a difference, really. Right? What I'm trying to point out here, right, is that if we look at the hi-hat now, and this is where things get really weird. I want you to look at how much low frequency information there is in the sound. There's actually not that big of a difference in the volume between this low information, right, which is about negative 60 dB, and this high information, which is negative 45. So why is it the high frequency content is so much louder? On the most simple level, the way that loudness works is that sharper, brighter sounds seem more obvious to us. They seem louder. That's where we perceive detail, because that's where the overtones of the human voice gain their clarity. So our ears are geared towards perceiving high frequencies and mid frequencies much clearer and much louder. Our ears literally look for them. But in actual scientific measurement, low frequencies literally produce a greater vibration, right? A greater amplitude of vibration. So that's the critical difference here, right? Is that one of them is measuring loudness in terms of the actual vibration of the sound, right? And one of them is measuring loudness in terms of the perception of the sound.
Thanks so much for watching. And don't forget, 343 TV goes live right here on our YouTube channel several days per week. And if you want to take a course with us or just join our community, you can find more information at 343labs.com or 343labs.de for our German website. See you next time.